Hey guys, Spudknocker here, and welcome back to DCS World. Today we're at the northeastern outskirts of Damascus to take a very informal first look and first impressions video of a brand new module that was just released yesterday that I'm sure many of you out there have been very excited for. That, of course, is a beast of a helicopter, the Mi-24P, NATO codename Hind-F attack helicopter. Now, many of you guys are very excited about this module for two different reasons that coincide with each other. It is, of course, the very first attack helicopter to be modeled in DCS World, and it is another piece of sorely needed Soviet/Russian military hardware modeled to a high fidelity. Now, of course, in DCS World, we have mostly Western systems that are modeled, such as the F-A-18, F-16, the upcoming F-15E, and others that are very modern and modeled to a high fidelity. However, Russian law has prevented Eagle Dynamics, who is partially based in Russia, from developing high-fidelity simulations of modern Russian military hardware. Hopefully this can change in the future, as it would be super awesome to fly a Su-30 with a friend in the back seat. But for now, the Mi-24 will have to work with your friend in the operator seat. Now, the Mi-24 has a very fascinating and very interesting history to it. For us in the West, it's really a symbol of communist oppression, if you could say something like that. The way it was used in Afghanistan to fight the Mujahideen, the way it's been used by various dictatorships around the world to suppress and oppress internal revolts, and its use in various civil wars across Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and even into Central and South America. It's definitely a very mean and very evil-looking helicopter that has been used for both good and bad across the world. Now, today we've got a Syrian Skin on our Mi-24. I wanted to show off the Syrian Skin because a lot of the previous videos that Wags has made or other DCS World content creators have made has focused on the Russian skins. It's also a perfect model of helicopter to be released along with the update to the Syria map that brings us Cyprus. The Cypriot Air Force flies the Mi-24 in its Mi-35 variant to a varying degree. They have quite a few of them, and they even flew in the Turkish invasion of Cyprus back in the 1990s. We've also got the older style, kind of MiG-looking rocket pods that are on the stub wings that definitely make the Mi-24 look super classic, as if it was flown in Afghanistan in the 1980s. As well as when you see various countries that have had Mi-24s for a very long time and in service for a very long time, they usually have this older style rocket pod fitted to their Mi-24s, such as in Libya, Syria, and other countries across the world that are facing civil wars and other kind of disturbances to their society. So let's go ahead and hop into the pilot seat and get her started up, and we'll put her through her paces in a very informal first impressions video to kind of help you guys out who may be on the fence as to whether you want to hop into a helicopter and pull the trigger on buying the Mi-24P. Now, a bit of a disclaimer that may help some of you guys is obviously you guys know that I'm definitely very fixed wing focused. I'm definitely not a helicopter pilot, definitely not a Hind pilot. I know nothing about helicopters other than the very basics of how they operate and how they fly. And so I figured we'd just go ahead and hop in. We see what we can do with it. I've spent all day yesterday trying to figure out the more or less basics of how to fly a helicopter. And hopefully we can make a little bit of an interesting video for you guys here. So let's go ahead and hop in and get started. So as you guys I'm sure have noticed, the art and modeling of the Mi-24 is definitely bar none. It is a very beautiful model, and it is modeled to a very high standard. Now, there definitely are some bugs and some things to worry about when flying the Mi-24, and they seem to be mostly due to the flight model as well as the Petrovitch AI. But hopefully we don't run into any of those today in this video, and we'll do our absolute best to get the most out of this helicopter. Now, we do have a bit of a situation here. We've got some rebels who are bringing in some vehicles full of rebel fighters and a couple armored vehicles coming up towards the northeastern outskirts of Damascus. We're going to go ahead and start on up, get on out there, and hopefully put an end to their incursion into Damascus here. So first thing we'll do is let's talk about the moving map display. It's a very, very cool piece of technology that we're going to see in other 1970s/1980s-esque modules as they come out in the near future. The one that really comes to mind right off the bat is the A7E Corsair 2. Now this moving map is not a screen, it's not an LCD, it's not even a CRT. It's a piece of film with a map printed onto it. And as the aircraft moves and the gyros sense movement of the aircraft, it actually moves the map around. It moves this piece of film on a giant roller throughout the actual screen that's backlit here. It's very, very similar to the moving map technology that you see on other aircraft of that era, like the A7E Corsair 2. Very, very cool, and we'll definitely see more of this in DCS World as we go through different modules and their release in the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this puppy started up. We'll go ahead and turn on our batteries. We'll get the rectifiers going. We'll get the APU generator going. We will go ahead and make sure these guys, AC, I'll leave those off for now. And we'll go ahead and delete the seat so we can see a little bit better. We'll get these inverters turned on. Generator switch. We'll leave the generator switches off for now. And we should be good to go ahead and open up our fuel pumps over on this side. Don't have any external tanks loaded, so we will not flip that switch. And we'll make sure we get all of our circuit breakers turned on. Probably should have done that first, but the Mi-24 is a very resilient helicopter. The avionics are pretty tank-like, like the actual airframe of the aircraft itself, and so you can do things a bit out of order and still get to the correct result at the end of the day, which is fantastic. Mi-24 is just made to be as robust and idiot-proof as possible when it comes to pilots who may not have the exact awesome standard of training that you might see in the West. So let's go ahead and get our APU fired up. All right, we just barely see that light for the APU starting up. We may have to zoom in a little bit to see that light a little bit better. We can see our temperature on our APU starting to rise, which is fantastic. If only we could put our little digital hand over that light so that way we could see the light a little bit better. Okay, we've got... These guys are good to go. That means we are good to go ahead and start cranking our engine. Ah, there we go. Rotor brake, duh. There we go. So there, as you go through learning a module, you want to definitely try and figure out how to troubleshoot the module as you go through it. So if something's not working for you right off the bat, it's better to, instead of trying to memorize exactly what button to press and what order to get your outcome, you want to figure out, okay, if this is happening and it's not working for me, what can I do to rectify that problem? And so in this case, we weren't getting to start off, and I had kind of forgotten about the fact that we got to turn the rotor brake off. So if you are trying to crank the engine in the Mi-24, or in fact in the Mi-8 as well, because they're both very similar helicopters, and it is not going, you better want to check the rotor brake, because that's probably going to be the issue. So, didn't mean to look like an idiot there, but there are lots of things in the startup procedure of the Mi-24 that we need to make sure that we get in order to continue the startup. So as we can see here, we already messed it up again, and the RPM is going to fall back down to the bottom. We're going to wait a moment here until the RPM comes all the way back down, and then we're going to actually go ahead and restart the engine. We're going to crank it again, then we're going to take the fuel cutoff, make sure we turn that on and much quicker to allow fuel to flow to the engine and continue the startup process. Now, as I said earlier, this aircraft is very tank-like and will take a lot of abuse when it comes to actually starting up the aircraft. So there we go. Now we're going to have a good jump in RPM, and that should be a lot better for us. Now we can see we're starting to get some RPM on the main rotor. Things are starting to actually come to life here in our left-hand engine. And again, it's important to get used to the systems of the aircraft and know how to troubleshoot it when you do something wrong. So that way you don't get super frustrated with it. Just trying to learn, press this button and that button to get outcome Y is very, very difficult, rather than learning exactly what's happening behind why you're pressing those buttons in order to make sure you know what's actually happening behind it. So that way if something does go wrong, you can go ahead and troubleshoot it very, very easily. So that number 1 engine is good to go. We'll go ahead and start up our second engine. There we go. Now we went ahead and did that in the right order. Now we're going to have a good jump in that RPM. As soon as you see that RPM needle for your engine start to jump like that, you know you've gotten the startup procedure correct. Now we just have to wait for the RPM to rise up as the startup procedure for that engine proceeds. And we'll go ahead and turn on our generators. Make sure our AC power is in the full up position. Ground power is off. That's good. Rectifiers are on. Generators are on. Fantastic. And we go ahead and turn these guys off at this point. And now we're going to go ahead and increase our throttle on the twist on our collective. And that's going to go ahead and bring our rotor RPM up to about 95%. Now, see these two yellow lines on the RPM for the rotor and the RPM for the engines? Your electrical systems in the aircraft will not work correctly unless you have the RPM between these yellow lines. That's something that's very, very important and will alleviate a lot of frustration for you when you're trying to turn on systems like the Autopilot. We'll go ahead and kill the APU at this point. And we'll go ahead and keep turning on the rest of our systems. We're going to leave the RWR volume to off. We're going to turn our IFF on, of course. That's very important. We're going to turn on our radios. That should be good there. We're going to turn on our fire suppression systems to the automatic position. And we're going to go ahead and come down here and turn on our autopilot. Autopilot is going to be very, very helpful for you in learning how to actually fly the helicopter itself. It's definitely not an easy thing to learn and transition yourself from fixed wing to rotary wing. And having that autopilot on is going to be very, very helpful. We're going to have Petrovitch turn on the weapon systems in his cockpit. And we're going to go ahead and turn on our weapons here. Now, I know you're all going to say, Spud, what are you doing? Turning Master Arm on the ground. Well, with this helicopter, things can be a little tricky to look down and touch while you're actually flying the aircraft. So I like to make sure that I get things turned on in the air rather than, on the ground, rather than try to mess with them in the air. And we can see we got our CCIP sight for our rockets, and we've got our reticle, our fixed reticle for aiming fixed weapons like the 30mm cannon, and so on. Everything is looking pretty darn good. We've got our gear handle in the down position. We'll go ahead and seal up our cockpit, and then looking around here, I think we're good to go. So, like I've said before, the startup procedure, at least the quick startup procedure, not by the book or anything like that, is really not too bad in this helicopter. I find it to be much easier and much quicker than the Mi-8 HIP. So with that, we'll go ahead and we will kill the brake. And we will start to taxi out. We'll go ahead and set a new trim position. And without pulling the collective up, we're just going to push forward on the stick. We just gently start a nice gentle taxi. We're kind of getting a bit buffeted here because we got about 10 knots of wind coming from 090, which is going to be right down this runway. We're going to taxi out onto this small jump pad for this helicopter base. Not exactly a forward operating base, it's more of a fixed helicopter base. We're going to avoid using our brakes if we can. We're going to pull back on the cyclic for adjusting our speed as we taxi. It's definitely something to get used to, coming from fixed-wing airplanes, that's for sure. We'll go ahead and stop her as well as we can. Turned around. Whoop. Definitely a bit squirrely in the wind today, that's for sure. There we go. Now I've got her all settled down in the wind. Pointed into the wind, so that's going to be much, much better, much, much easier for takeoff. And we'll do a little bit of a hover test here to see what happens as we start to pull the collective up. Going nice and gentle, nice and slowly, seeing how the helicopter reacts and how we need to trim it out to get a good, stable takeoff. There we go. It's looking better. That's looking pretty stable right there. And Petrovitch has our weapons ready. That's even better. And just pushing forward on the cyclic as we hold the collective pretty darn steady. Just going to gently take off to the east, pointed right into the wind to help us out a little bit. Using that trimmer to help us out as much as possible. And we'll make a gentle turn around to our left-hand side. Once you get it up in the air, it's really not too bad. It more or less flies like a fixed-wing airplane. And from everything I've read from historical sources about the Mi-24, and we've got a bit of a bunker complex here, which I believe is an air defense site. I did not place the actual SAMs themselves down. Well, that's okay. And then we've got our little helicopter base right over there, where we're going to come back and return for a landing. Then up to the north here, we should have another helicopter base. Head and shed a little light on the subject. And of course, we got to turn on the fan. It's a hot day here in Syria. And funny enough, you can actually play with the fan. Like, I've heard that you can actually play with it with a VR controller. Like, you can actually spin it when it's not running, and you can grab it and stop the fan as you're flying. So you can grab it, and it's not a canned animation. It actually changes its position of where it stops based on where you grab it, which is kind of funny. It's kind of funny that ED would put in the time to actually do that, but it's kind of cool at the same time. So we'll kind of zoom in on our little flight plan here. Oop, looks like I'm flying the totally wrong direction. And there's that second helicopter base. As you guys can tell, I'm very far away from actually being able to fly a full-on mission in a helicopter. I'm still getting disoriented because I'm still so concentrated on just flying the helicopter that it's very difficult for me to actually get in and have any kind of situational awareness. But that's where training and practice comes in, that's for sure. I also recommend trying to use your trim hat as well as your actual trimmer switch to help fly the helicopter a little more smoothly. And we can see that second helicopter base right over here. Got a couple more hips on the ramp here. The Mi-24, from everything that I've read about the aircraft, is mostly used for frontal attacks from a forward flight, rather than hovering and doing a bunch of fancy tricks in the air that like we see a lot of like video of, say, Apaches or Cobras, you know, hovering and hiding behind things and popping up in a hover, shooting and then popping right back down. The Hind is used more as, you would think it more like almost fixed wing tactics, where it's used for attacking objects or targets, I guess you could say, from a very fast forward flight trajectory and then escaping using its speed. So Petrovitch up front has got our weapons ready to go, so we'll go ahead and fire our Sturms first, and we'll get him to start looking for stuff. Alright, I guess I can't move the sight yet. Weapons are ready, so come on, Petrovitch, do your thing, buddy. Got a beautiful day for flying here, that's for sure. And we're looking for these vehicles along these roads through these really beautiful fields here. It looks like a bunch of orchards and farms and whatnot. Ah, okay, so he does have a target. That's fantastic. We will go ahead and we will have him attack one of these targets. Don't think we're close yet. Close enough, that is. Let's try and gain a little bit of altitude so that way we can allow for an easier shot from his perspective. Now the Petrovitch AI is very accurate with the Sturms, but I have had him miss a few times, which, I mean, to be quite honest, I think it's better that he does miss once in a while, because that is more, I guess you could say, true to life, because holding that sight onto a target is not easy, that is for sure. Today we're just going to be flying from the pilot seat, and maybe we'll hop into the operator seat at a later date. About 50% of the time, Petrovitch in the pilot seat will absolutely have a cow and fly me right into the ground. So I don't want to risk that while making this video. There goes one of our Sturms. We're just going to keep right on a flight path right to that object, and kaboom. Looks like we definitely hit something. I can definitely see that convoy at this point. And we'll go ahead and come off away from the target before they start engaging us with any heavy weapons they may have. Now that we've got a fire on that convoy, it's going to be much, much easier for us to re-engage that target, as we'll have a nice visual of what to look for. I'm going to retrim out the helicopter, so that way we can retain straight level flight pretty darn easily. As you can see, we're maintaining about 200 kilometers per hour, which is about 108, 110-ish knots. So we're using that forward flight, that forward speed in the Mi-24 to really allow us and help us to maintain separation away from that target area. And we can see that fire out there. Tell Petrovitch to point His Sturm's out there. Probably didn't build up enough separation. Alright, he's got another tank for us. Kind of getting some side slip, that's not good. Alright, just fired our Sturm. We're going to try and keep our nose on it as much as we can for him. We're not doing as good of a job. What? It looks like he got a hit. Actually, it looks like he may have missed. You can definitely see some scattered trucks out there. And we can see another convoy right there. So looks like T-55s and some trucks down there are what these rebels are using to attack these outskirts of Damascus out here. I'm just using that trim hat a little bit in order to keep the aircraft flying nice and straight and level. We're going to push the nose down, gain a little bit more airspeed, try and build up that separation a little bit faster. We've got 2 more Sturms left. We can see our RWR down here is showing us having radars off to our right-hand side and off to our left-hand side. Now, based off of what I know about the battle space around us, those are going to be friendly Syrian Integrated Air Defense System, SAMs, rather than being any kind of threat to us. However, we have to be very, very careful because, as we all know, Syrian SAMs are not the best at performing IFF and making sure they're shooting at the right thing. Alright, there's our target area. Okay, we're under VNE now, so that's fantastic. We're going to go after another tank over here. We're going to make sure we get a little bit closer. Alright, starting to get pretty fast, so we're going to pull back on the collective, bring the nose up a little bit. There goes a Sturm shot. Kaboom. And we'll have him look over to our left this time for our third shot. Oh, there we go. I have noticed that you can take quite a bit of ground fire, especially from light weapons, in the Mi-24. I've taken fire from things like Dishkas firing 12.7mm rounds and absolutely just shedded those off like they were little mosquito bites. 50 cal rounds that don't do very much. Once you get to being shredded by, say, a Vulcan with 20mm, that's where that starts to get bad. And then 23mm rounds, you can take 1 or 2 of those before getting any kind of real issues. But you just have to be extremely careful when flying around more heavily defended areas because it is a helicopter. And helicopters will eventually succumb to battle damage, just like any other aircraft. And if they hit critical areas, such as your rotor hub or something of that nature, things could go bad real fast. For the most part, it seems that battle damage in the Mi-24 seems to hit your engines pretty hard. I've gotten, like 23mm rounds have set my engines on fire. I haven't been pilot sniped at all, so I think that I'm pretty sure that the armor for the actual pilot and weapon system operator is very good and protects us in the seat here very, very well. It's just the rest of our helicopter that tends to be a bit more on the vulnerable side. And there goes our last Sturm. And kaboom. Nice shot. We'll go ahead and pull off and we'll get ready to attack the target with our rocket pods. Those classic looking rocket pods that look like they were ripped off a MiG and thrown onto a helicopter. I love them. So cool. And it looks like we didn't bring up our gear. Awesome. Alright, we'll bring up those gear. Again, not an expert in flying helicopters, and it's definitely weird to not have fixed landing gear in the Mi-24. I have belly landed the Mi-24 multiple times, just kind of like lifted off again, hovered, put the gear down, and then landed again to put it nice and gently back down onto the gear. I'm sure in real life, coming from other helicopters, pilots have definitely belly landed the Hind in the past. And I set my weapon selector to actually be able to be moved by a button on my HOTAS. So that way when I'm flying the aircraft, because I'm so busy flying the Hind itself, looking down in the cockpit for me is an incredibly dangerous idea, just because I'm not very good at flying the helicopter to begin with. So yeah, there we go. We've got the gear up this time. That's a big fire over there. Alright, we are on very level ground here, so we should be able to have a relatively accurate approach and launch with our rockets here with our pseudo CCIP system that we have here in the old Hind. And we'll start to reduce collective, and we'll bring the nose back a little bit. We don't want to get towards VNE and start to get into a retreating blade stall, because that would not be good and not help us at all here. Alright, we can see some of those vehicles down there. Again, trying not to get into a situation where we're going to hit at airspeed where a retreating blade stall could happen. Hello. Definitely not helping very much today. Oh boy, that's a lot of ground fire. A little bit more than I bargained for there. Oh man, we gotta get out of here. Oh, definitely getting hit. All of our lights are extinguished, so looking pretty good. That was a little scary. I think that the tanks are shooting at us with both Dishkas on top of the turrets themselves, as well as with their coaxially mounted 7.62 weapons. That was not good. I'm unsure as to why that initial shots with our CCIP system with our rockets went so long. But again, it's not a perfect system. Our secondary shots definitely look good. I probably was not looking at our range indicator. That's another thing that is a bit different that I haven't had to deal with yet. Try to get that nose up, get out of that potential retreating blade stall situation. Oh shit. Can't really seem to approach these guys from a vector that we're not going to get torn up by those guns. Well, I think we've been pretty thoroughly chased off by these guys. I don't think there's much we can really do against them, other than land, rearm, and reattack with some different weapon types. Let's see if we can maybe get a longer range rocket shot off on them. See what we can do there. Potentially maybe even walk those rockets into the target. Definitely feel that wind pushing us. Kind of roll to the right to zero out that side slip. That's going to look like a better shot. Well, that seemed to make their gunfire a little more accurate when we were raining rockets down on them. But anyway, before this video gets too long, let's go ahead and head back home. And before we get shot down... Whoa, man. Whoa. Oh, shit. Woo. I'm glad that my newly acquired helicoptering skills have kept me from dying there. And we'll deal with that side-mounted 30mm cannon on another day. Starting to get above via knee here. That's a little bit scary. And we'll start to navigate back towards our home base and hopefully make a nice landing. We do have quite a lot of fuel on board. Pretty darn heavy. Probably should have reduced the fuel load a little bit before making this flight. But we'll do the best we absolutely can. So, when it comes to deciding whether or not to actually buy this module, you've been an F-18 guy, you've been an F-16 guy, you've been an F-14 guy. You know, if you're willing to put in a little bit of effort in terms of learning something very, very new and very, very different, I definitely recommend it. It's so far been a lot of fun. And I think that in multiplayer, once the multiplayer bugs get kind of sorted out a little bit, I've heard that there's some massive desync issues when it comes to trying to fly the aircraft in multiplayer with a friend in the front seat. Such as you're trying to get the aircraft started up and the guy in the front seat doesn't even see that he has electrical power or that the engines are running or even that the blades are spinning. Things of that nature, as well as issues with the Petrovitch AI, where it's literally 50% of the time, I will find myself just flown directly into the ground by the Petrovitch AI whenever I hop into the front seat. The Petrovitch AI doesn't yet have voiceovers, which I find to be a little annoying because I have to kind of be on top of what the subtitles are telling me all the time. Unlike with Jester, where I don't have to worry about subtitles with him, I just listen to what he's saying. You know, that will be a major, major boost. But from the backseat position, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the backseat and flying from the backseat. Petrovitch, even though he's a little bit annoying because he doesn't talk yet. Yep, there's our two big smokestacks denoting where our helicopter base is here. The backseat is absolutely fully enjoyable, for sure. As you saw, we just attacked a target. We had some fun. We fired our air-to-ground missiles. We fired our rockets. We got ourselves shot to pieces. All that good stuff. You know, as long as you're okay with some small little bugs here and there, then you should enjoy it very, very thoroughly. Make a little low pass over our heliport. There we are, back home, right where we started. And we got ourselves a nice little mosque right here, kind of cool. Flying over the town, letting the townsfolk know that we've defeated the evil rebels who are coming to liberate you from the evil dictator. And we'll start to slow ourselves down. Make sure we get pointed into the wind. I'm going to go ahead and turn my sight back up because I like to have that for the purposes of helping me stay stable. Whoop, definitely not being very stable right now, am I? So we'll start to slow this tub down. This bucket of Russian bolts. Make sure we get the gear down. Definitely getting too fast still. Gears down, fantastic. Starting to look a little bit better. Hello there. See, that trimmer can be a little hairy when you have a flight sim set up for fixed wing rather than rotary wing, because what I mean by that is I have really heavy springs on my stick and I don't want to swap them out because that's a giant pain in the butt. And with helicopters using the trimmer button, it can be a little bit funky. Come on, helicopter, come on down. Come on, baby. Come on. Come on. Come on. There we go. Okay, guys, we're back on the ramp here, exactly where we started. We started up the helicopter right there. So, again, this is going to be something that's very, very different for you fixed-wing guys, and it's something that's going to breathe some new life into DCS for you if you're willing to put in some time and some effort to learn something that's just going to be so different and complex to you. That's just going to be against all that muscle memory you've built up flying F-14s and F-18s and F-16s. But I think once the multiplayer issues are sorted out in terms of the desync between the pilot seat and the operator seat, it's going to be an absolute blast to fly with a friend who is trying to track targets with guided missiles and is looking for stinger launches from the Mujahideen that you're attacking, doing all kinds of things that can be a lot of fun together in a helicopter that is meant for blowing up targets rather than transporting soldiers. Now, of course, the Mi-24 has that secondary capability of also being a transport. So I think that's going to add a lot of interesting mission variety to your Mi-24 pilots. And it's just going to be a lot of fun. Now, paradoxically, I actually recommend practicing in the Mi-24 with a nice heavy fuel loadout. Make sure the aircraft is heavy when you practice, because the aircraft, when it is heavier, is going to be, especially on landing, a little bit more forgiving of those massively huge throttle inputs, and thus it's going to dampen out any kind of throttle oscillations that you may get into, where the helicopter is not going to be dolphin diving up and down on you so much as you try to land the helicopter. So the heavier it is, the bigger your throttle inputs can be, and therefore it's not going to be quite as squirrely feeling to you when you first try it out. Again, as I said, it's going to be something completely different for your fixed-wing pilots, but I think it's worth it. And I think the Eagle Dynamics, of course, is going to be squashing bugs, and you know, we play in an open beta environment for the sake of we want the new stuff as early as possible, and we want to help Eagle Dynamics find those bugs. Hopefully Petrovitch is updated with voiceovers soon, because that's going to make my life a lot easier as a pilot in the backseat. And hopefully these multiplayer bugs get squashed pretty quickly here, because I would very, very much like to fly in a multiplayer kind of like Afghanistan 1980s type of situation. I think that would be an absolute blast and a ton of fun. So let's take one last little look at the outside of our beautiful Mi-24 helicopter before we end the video here. Definitely a very mean helicopter. Looks like it was absolutely meant to do the job of flying in wars and killing people, that's for sure. I just love the look of those old style rocket pods, that's for sure. We can see that our missile racks are now empty. Alrighty guys, well, I hope this video helps you guys out if you are on the fence about whether or not to buy the Mi-24 or not, and I hope it gives you guys a first impression good first impression of the module itself. So, fly safe out there, guys, and of course, stay healthy, and we will see you in the next one.